Hello, and welcome to School Choice Ohio's Transportation Basics webinar. Thank you for joining us. First, today, we're going to take a brief look at the laws, rules, and guidance that govern school transportation in Ohio. Next, we're going to talk about what you can do to be prepared for the upcoming school year. Things may be somewhat different given the impact of the COVID-19 virus. Then we'll spend a little bit of time talking about dealing with disputes and district decisions to declare transportation impractical. If you have any questions after viewing this webinar, you can contact School Choice Ohio directly. Our Director of Provider Outreach, James Ragland, at JRAGLAND@scohio.org. So let's take a look at key transportation laws and rules. Like most education policies, there are normally three sources of requirements. State laws are found in Ohio Revised Code, in this case, in Chapter 3327. These laws are the result of legislation passed by Ohio's General Assembly and signed by the governor. Most of the statutes that govern how school transportation works, particularly transportation of charter and non-public school students, are included in this Chapter 3327 of Revised Code. Second, we have Ohio Administrative Code. This is often referred to as the rules. These rules are adopted by state agencies, or in the case of education, by the Ohio State Board of Education. Lastly, many state agencies, including the Ohio Department of Education, also provide guidance, frequently asked questions, and other documents that are designed to further clarify laws and rules. State law establishes the basic requirements that determine which students must be transported. Districts, through their local policy, can exceed state minimum requirements, but they cannot drop below those minimum standards. At a minimum, the state law requires districts to transport all K through 8 students if they reside 2 miles or more from their school. Second, districts may transport students in grades 9 through 12, but they're not required to do so. And lastly, state law requires that bus stop locations for students in grades K through 8 must be within a half a mile of the student's residence. Remember these state minimums. If out of concern for not enough capacity to transport students, that districts are working to reduce the number of students they're transporting, they may do so by moving to state minimums. So what's important to students that are enrolled in community and chartered non-public schools? What's important is that the state law requires that districts transport eligible students that are enrolled in chartered non-public schools as well as community or charter schools. The general standard for this transportation is that community and non-public schools are generally entitled to the same transportation services as those provided to students enrolled in the district, in the case that the travel time is less than 30 minutes to the community or chartered non-public school that students attend from the designated pickup point. Does this mean if students ride on a district-owned yellow bus that charters and non-public students also must be transported on district yellow buses? The answer is not necessarily. What is important is that districts cannot prioritize the transportation of district students over that of eligible community school and chartered non-public students. So we're going to get in the weeds for just a brief moment here, and we're going to talk about that Ohio laws and rules recognize different types of transportation. By and large, the overwhelming majority of students that are transported in the state of Ohio are on type 1, 1A, or type 2 buses. This is yellow bus transportation. Type 1 is board owned, leased, and operated by the school district. 1A is through bus service contracted between districts or a consortium of districts. Or 2, that the buses are owned, leased, and operated by a vendor and assigned to a specific district. You'll see that type 3 transportation, which is students that are using public transit, public utility transportation, is also recognized under state law. So what happens if a district decides that it's just not practical to transport a student? If a student is otherwise eligible for transportation, the distance that they're being transported is less than 30 minutes, and transportation for a similar district student is being provided, districts can still opt to determine that transportation for that eligible student who attends a community or chartered non-public school is impractical. In order to declare transportation impractical, districts must consider 6 factors that are in state law. And although there are 6 factors, it's important to understand that districts do not have to rely on all 6 of these factors in order to declare transportation impractical. So as you can see, they consider the time and distance required to provide transportation, the number of pupils to be transported, the cost of transportation that includes equipment, maintenance, personnel, and administration costs, whether similar or equivalent service is provided to other pupils that are eligible for transportation. Districts also must consider whether and to what extent additional service unavoidably disrupts current transportation schedules, and whether other reimbursable types of transportation are also available. This is a very quick overview of the key requirements that must be considered before a district can determine that they wish to declare transportation impractical. So let's spend a few minutes talking about what your school and parents can do to prepare for this upcoming school year. We know that the COVID-19 virus has had a major impact on K-12 education in Ohio, and that impact is not likely to disappear even as we start the new school year. So how do we prepare? What can school leaders do? First, if your school has students that have been transported for years, recognize that this upcoming year, a few things may be different. Take the time right now to review district policies and procedures for the districts that you deal with. Make sure that there haven't been any policy changes. You may have read in the media that Dayton, for example, has indicated that they no longer will transport community school and chartered non-public students, that they are going to, or they plan to have all of those students ride public transit across K-12. And in the city of Columbus, their district has at least had conversations about whether or not transportation for non-district students might in fact be impractical. Second, make sure you know who to talk to in the district transportation offices in the districts in which you operate. How do you get a hold of the responsible party? Does the district transportation office have someone specific assigned to chartered non-public or charter school, community school transportation? Know who that is and how to get a hold of them. Also, make sure that you are very familiar with all deadlines and timelines. Is there a deadline for parents to request transportation to have it in place for the beginning of the school year? How does that happen? What is the district's plan for the upcoming year? Ask about how they are going to be providing instruction. Are they looking at all in person, a hybrid or a mixture of virtual and in-person, or fully virtual, or some of the above? You may have already seen where some districts, in particular Cincinnati Public Schools, has indicated that they are not going to have students in school 5 days a week. You need to understand what their calendar is. It does not mean that your calendar must match theirs. They are required to transport eligible students that are in session for both community and chartered non-public schools, not on Saturdays and Sundays. But for instance, if your school determines that you are going to do in-person education and you're going to have your students in 5 days a week, that's fine. Your calendar does not need to match the district's calendar. You need to talk to districts about beginning and end times and their school calendar. Many of the districts will be going through some changes. They may start with more staggered begin and end times to try to stretch their transportation resources. They might also be starting earlier or later. The last piece is, as you're talking to districts, share any unique circumstances for your students. An example of this might be that you have high school students that do work study or internships. Find out, in fact, if the district provides some sort of transportation for students with those unique schedules. So what else can we do to prepare for this upcoming school year? First and foremost, make sure parents request transportation as soon as possible. Yesterday isn't soon enough in some cases. Have them make the request today. Waiting is perhaps the biggest mistake that we can make at this point. The more time we have to plan for on both individual non-public and charter schools and districts, the better things will be for students. Although the transportation must be requested by parents, we recommend that schools prepare a list of students that have requested transportation and make sure that all of those requests have been made. You're also going to want to, at some point, share that list with the district to make sure that no one kind of falls through the cracks. Ask the districts about their timeline. Do they have deadlines that they want to have the requests in to provide transportation for the beginning of school? When do they anticipate notifying students? When will actual routes be available? If there is a timeline or a deadline, ask districts about it now. You're going to want to make sure that you have requested and have in your possession copies of all the forms, policies, and procedures that are going to be used by the district. This is extremely important. Many districts will only recognize requests or requirements that are submitted on their board-approved forms. Now's the time to reach out to districts and request copies of all of those. Lastly, you're going to want to document all of your communications on the transportation issue. Ask parents to share copies of their requests if they're through email. If it's done through an online portal, ask parents if they can send you screenshots so that you know that the requests have been made. You're going to see, as we kind of walk through dealing with disputes, how important documenting everything is. If you are talking to somebody on the phone, follow it up with an email that basically includes a description of your conversation. So we're going to talk a little bit about dealing with disputes, not because we think that they are inevitable or that we are expecting that everyone will have a dispute with districts. The truth is, we hope that each and every school leader has a positive working relationship with the districts that they deal with. We want things to go smoothly. We also want you to be prepared, however, if things don't go smoothly. First, make sure that students in question are eligible for transportation. First of all, do they meet the state requirements? And remember, high school transportation is not required under the state minimums, only transportation for grades K through 8 for students that are living more than 2 miles from their school. So look at, do the students in question meet state requirements? Second, if you are requesting transportation for a student and it is beyond the state minimums, it involves high school students or students that say live less than 2 miles, maybe 1.5 miles from their school, make sure that transportation that you're requesting aligns with the service that is offered to district enrolled students. Remember, there is supposed to be some equity here, so that if a district is providing transportation to its own students in a certain grade or based on certain mileage, that they must in fact continue to offer that to students that are enrolled in community and chartered non-public schools. You're also going to want to make sure that the travel time is less than 30 minutes between the school in which the student is enrolled and their home. If a district indicates that a student is ineligible for transportation because the travel time is greater than 30 minutes, an official timing through the Department of Education can be requested. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about that process. Please contact School Choice Ohio if you want some more information on what that looks like. Remember, districts can transport students that are outside that 30 minutes, but they are not required to, and it is somewhat unusual for districts to do so. So let's talk about dealing with disputes. The first thing you want to make sure is that you're periodically checking as to what's happening, what the progress is. This is particularly important as you're communicating with district transportation office, that you don't wait until just before school to check on district plans. You need to be checking on that now. You need to be making sure that parents are requesting transportation now. Do not wait. If they need some assistance or they are struggling with an online portal, it might be possible for you to help them from the school so that they can go ahead and make sure that they are requesting this. But if there's a dispute, if there's a question about who's going to be transported, don't let it go. Keep checking on that. As we mentioned, document all communications. This is going to be critical if this dispute goes all the way to impracticality and a hearing and a decision by the State Board of Education. Having that information is critical. Don't wait to ask for help. If you have a question or something isn't working, you can come and talk to School Choice Ohio. We're happy to help. If you are part of associations or accrediting agencies or affiliate organizations, reach out to them. You can also request some assistance from the Ohio Department of Education. So if the student meets the requirements and is eligible for transportation, either from state minimums or district policy, the next option for districts, if they are looking to reduce transportation, is to determine that transportation for students is impractical. So what does that look like? First of all, you may hear about this from your district transportation office. For a student, and this is at the student level, not the school level, for transportation of a student to be determined impractical, the local district school board will have to act at a public meeting to confirm impracticality. And as part of that, remember, there are 6 factors that they are supposed to consider. You're going to want to continue to monitor school district, school board agendas to see if student names are showing up. As you learn that perhaps district is looking to determine transportation impractical, you should request a copy of the analysis that was done to support that determination of impracticality. Earlier, we talked about having all of the forms. You're going to want to make sure that before the school board acts, that you have a copy of the form used to accept or reject payment in lieu. Now, parents can accept payment in lieu, and that is a maximum of $250 for the year. They also have the ability to reject the payment in lieu, and in either case, they're going to need to have the form completed. If you know that a school board of education is going to be acting on a resolution of impracticality for some of your students, you're going to want to have those forms completed by the parents just ahead of that school board action. You probably don't want to date them until the day of the action or the next day, but talk to parents about whether they are looking to accept that $250, which likely is probably only about 10% of the actual cost, or if in fact they're going to reject the payment in lieu and request fact-finding and mediation. You're going to want to have the parents, and this may be something where the school collects all of these and submits them. You are going to want to submit that form accepting or rejecting payment in lieu as quickly as possible after the local school district acts. Don't wait. You want to submit it right away, particularly if the parents have decided that they are going to reject payment in lieu of. Timing is everything if that is going to be their option. So first, make sure that any rejection of payment in lieu, the form that you send in includes a request for mediation and that transportation be provided while the issue is resolved. State law indicates that once mediation is requested, after payment in lieu has been rejected, that communication must be in place and continue until the dispute is resolved. This is really important. As you know, this is why timing is everything. And as you move into fact finding, having that evidence of what has occurred will also be important. A lot of the forms that are used by districts do not specifically mention mediation or they don't mention that transportation should continue while the issue is resolved. If the form that you have does not include those two things, the school should create an attachment that the parent can sign that specifically requests mediation and that transportation continue while the dispute is being resolved. I can't underscore that enough, how important this is. This form and the request for mediation and transportation needs to go to the Office of the District Superintendent and to the Department of Education's Area Coordinator. We also suggest that you send a copy to the district's transportation office, and if the parent is handling this, to you at the chartered non-public or community school. The link below includes, it will take you to a directory of the area coordinators. Area coordinators are assigned to geographic regions, and you need to make sure that they handle these issues for the Department of Education, that in addition to providing the rejection to the district, that you also get it to the Department of Education. Again, they handle mediation. The request for mediation needs to go to an area coordinator. Here's something important to recall. Districts cannot determine impracticality of transportation for a whole school. All decisions must be made at the individual student level. So if that sounds like it might be a little cumbersome, if a district determines that maybe 300 students in a school, that transportation is impractical, you're exactly correct. There's going to have to be fact-finding and mediation at the individual student level, as well as the final determination. Now, it may be that the area coordinator is going to try to deal with similar complaints in the same process. But remember, there can be no blanket determination of impracticality of transportation based on the school. So what happens again if payment in lieu is rejected? State law requires that districts provide transportation from the time mediation is requested until the dispute is settled. How long does that take? That's going to vary. It could be as short as a couple of months. In some cases, it's taken up to 6 months for the dispute to be fully settled. So if payment in lieu is rejected and there is now a dispute around impracticality, what does that process look like? Well, first, you've sent in the request for mediation. You've rejected payment in lieu of. This has to come from the parents, and there will be a form that has to be signed. You need to request mediation and that transportation continue. You've supplied it to the district and now also to the area coordinators at the Department of Education. And the area coordinators are going to start to do some fact-finding. And again, as we've talked about, during this fact-finding process, this is when it's important to have documentation of who did what when, what information was shared, what you tried to offer in terms of potentially adjusting start and end times or adjustments to the calendar. All of that documentation is now going to be part of the fact-finding process. Once there's been a fact-finding process, there's going to be a mediation. So the Department of Education's area coordinators are going to try to find a solution to the dispute. In many cases, when the parties are brought together and the record is reviewed, something is worked out. It may not be exactly what the district wants. It may not be exactly what the community school or chartered non-public school would like, but it is an agreement that can take place where everybody signs off and the dispute can end there. If the mediation fails to reach a solution, parents can request that there be a hearing. Now, this is a hearing that's frequently referred to as a Chapter 119 hearing. It is a type of due process. And what happens is the Department of Education appoints a hearing officer. These individuals are typically attorneys. They hold a hearing. They collect evidence. Again, this is where this documentation is important. And then they make a written recommendation to the State Board of Education. Once the hearing is held and the hearing officer has provided their recommendation, the State Board at one of their meetings, they meet every month except for the month of August, the board will vote on a resolution. Now, the board can agree with the recommendation of the hearing officer or not. They are free to take action however they see fit. And it is fair to say that sometimes when the disputes go all the way to the State Board of Education for action, that the board frequently will side with the district. So that's important to understand what that process is. There's rejection of payment in lieu of, request for mediation. Students must be transported during this time. The Department of Education area coordinators will do fact-finding. They will collect information and they will attempt to solve the dispute through mediation. It's a very worthwhile process and most disputes can be addressed at mediation. If after going through fact-finding and mediation, again, there is no resolution, there just is no agreement, parents can in fact request a hearing. The hearing officer will make a recommendation and then the Board of Education can make their decision. Until the Board of Education meets and confirms impracticality or rejects it, during this whole time, students must be transported by the district. So as I mentioned, if you have questions, you need assistance, you're not sure who at the department you should be talking to, we invite you to contact James Ragland, our School Choice Ohio Director of Provider Outreach, and his email is jragland@scohio.org. We invite you to stay updated. School Choice Ohio uses social media, both Twitter and Facebook, to address this issue and others, and we invite you to follow us on social media. That concludes our webinar on transportation for today. As I said, we're happy to entertain your questions. Follow us on social media, and you'll see at the bottom of this page our address for our website. Thank you so much for joining us today.